thank you. Senator Urquhart, please.
Now, Jenny and Steve have got carried to this lot, so Steve's going to
Senator Conroy, you've got 20 minutes to start. 20 minutes to start. We've been...
There's some discipline in this committee, Senator Conroy.
No, there's not. We'll go for as long as we want. And
Thank you very much, Senator Conroy, for your assistance, and I'll leave that to Senator Urquhart to discuss with you separately. So the time will go off in the first 20 minutes, but off you go.
I don't think I'll last 20 minutes, but
No, if you don't need it,
I want to
fine.
make it clear that we don't agree to these things. The Commonwealth Government Business Enterprise Governance and Oversight Guidelines apply to the NBN Co. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Does the department have a shareholder function? Is it part of your job to advise the Minister on shareholder issues in relation to GBEs?
Yes, Senator.
So there's a requirement, and I think I've got a copy of them here. Does that look familiar? Appreciate that Hansard can't do that, but that looks like them. There's a requirement in the guidelines in section 2.5 that requires GBEs in undertaking their business to avoid activities that could give rise to questions about their political impartiality. You're familiar with that?
Yes, Senator.
And can you confirm absolutely that NBN Co is subject to that requirement?
Yes, Senator.
Now, are you familiar with a letter from shareholder ministers Turnbull and Cormann to the chair of NBN Co of the 28th of April 2015, directing NBN Co to manufacture a counterfactual on a full fibre build in fixed line footprint?
Well, yes, Senator, but can I just say I think that letter requested that occur more than directed.
So is it a direction or is it a request?
It's a request.
So it's not a direction. So the NBN Co could have said no.
Yes, Senator.
So it's not one of the situations where a legal direction is given that they must do something.
Yes, Senator.
Now, the all-fibre rollout is a discarded scenario. Is that correct? By NBN Co?
Well, I'm not sure I understand your question, Senator.
Is it... well, NBN Co used to have an all-fibre rollout as a policy, and it doesn't have an all-fibre rollout as a policy at the moment.
No. Well,
it has
Senator,
an MTM.
In I believe, April of last year, the government sent a new statement of expectations to NBN Co, which indicated that the policy expectation from government was that NBN Co would have flexibility to determine what technology would be rolled out when and where, etc. So that's what's referred to as the multi-technology model.
So an all-fibre rollout is a discarded scenario, and let's be clear, when the strategic review was conducted, there were 6 scenarios, of which the all-fibre rollout was scenarios 1 and 2, and scenario 6 was adopted by the government and the board. That's correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Right. So that's why I use the phrase a discarded scenario, because the board adopted a different scenario, a different option.
Well, yes, Senator, but the company has been provided with flexibility to adjust the multi-technology mix as it goes through the process. So
yes, but the board hasn't hasn't decided that it is going to do an all-fibre rollout.
No, Senator.
Yeah. So an all-fibre scenario has no bearing whatsoever on either NBN Co or the government's policy prescriptions for the NBN.
Well, I think, Senator, I think if you're asking why the letter was written...
How about you answer the questions I do ask, and we'll get to other answers when I ask those questions. So I'm asking you a particular question. I'm probably going to come to the question you're seeking to answer.
Okay.
But I'm just trying to be clear that the government or NBN Co have not adopted and are not considering adopting a full fibre scenario.
Well, I think the scenario that NBN Co are adopting is outlined in its corporate plan, which is the multi-technology model and results in the deployment that is outlined in the corporate plan. It's just important to note that that's not a government requirement to fix the technology mix at that level. That's the company's decision as to what the best approach to rollout is.
And they've decided not to do a full fibre rollout.
That's right.
Full fibre being
Yes.
defined as the 93%.
Yes, Senator.
And the government have also mandated that.
They've given the company flexibility. Yes.
So, the letter says, and I quote, "While it is up to NBN Co to determine the basis for its estimate on an FTTP rollout, it may be that a scenario 1.5 aligns more closely with reality." Well, what does that mean? Can you just explain to me what that means?
Well, my understanding of what that means, Senator, is, if I recall correctly, scenario 1 was
Full fibre?
full fibre as it was being done. Scenario 2 was full fibre with
I know what the 6 scenarios are. I'm asking you, what does scenario 1.5 aligns most closely with reality mean?
Well, I think that it was a way of shareholder ministers saying to the company, you make a call as to what the best approach to rolling out a full fibre to the premises scenario would be.
But it's, I'd say directing, you're saying it's not a direction, it's a suggestion. But they're suggesting that scenario 1.5, and I'm quoting directly, aligns most closely with reality. I'm trying to understand what that means.
Well, I think it's a way of saying...
Which reality? I mean, the reality is NBN have decided to do scenario 1.6. So which reality is scenario 1.5 aligning most closely with?
Well, as I read it, Senator, it's a way of saying to the company, you make a judgment as to what the most realistic approach to rolling out a full fibre to the premises scenario would be. And it was trying to say that may not be the original model and it may not be the scenario 2. The company, make a judgment as to how you should do that and build it into the costing.
No, not build it into the costing. There's no suggestion that NBN Co are going to adopt 1.5. Their board has formally adopted 1.6.
Well, that's right, Senator, but the letter was requested so that information would be available to compare what the board is proposing to do versus alternatives.
So the government wanted NBN Co to cost something that neither the government nor NBN Co were intending to do.
Well, yes, Senator, but as a way of demonstrating that options had been looked at.
But they were looked at and dismissed 2 years ago.
Yes.
Almost 2 years ago.
Well, yes, but the company has flexibility as to, and will, under current policy, will continue to do so, in that they have flexibility to adjust the mix. And at the margins did in the latest corporate plan, because there was some adjustments to the types of technology, the percentages of which technology would be rolled out.
Yeah, but it was in the opposite direction. They actually made a decision to reduce the amount of fibre, and what the government has asked them to do is to do a costing of a policy that NBN Co weren't planning on introducing, and in fact were going in the opposite direction in the actual corporate plan. They were reducing the fibre footprint, but the government told them to go and do a costing of a full fibre rollout based on 1.5.
Well, they asked them to, yes, Senator.
Now that happened after, and you'll need to help me here, I will dig out Hansard if I need to, but I remember last time we had a discussion, we were talking about had the corporate plan been received by the government. When was not the first, probably the wrong way to describe it, but when we last met, you identified a date at which an NBN corporate plan had been received by the government. Can you remember that?
I believe the first draft, a draft, was received by the normal deadline, which is the end of May. And that's my recollection of what what we would have said at the last.
Yeah, no, I just don't remember, so I'm just seeking to establish. I'm sure we can look it up. But I still come back to, why was the government suggesting to NBN Co to cost something that NBN Co clearly had indicated it wasn't going to do, and in fact was moving in the exact opposite direction, and all of its draft corporate plans were indicating that it was going to reduce the fibre footprint, not to increase the fibre footprint?
Well, I think, Senator, at that time the government was aware that there were changes in the peak funding requirement for the multi-technology mix model, and they were keen to make sure that there was a comparison put on the table with the best available information at that time of other alternatives, given that the company has the flexibility to consider other alternatives.
Yes, but what the company would have been putting, and did put to the government, was a reduction in the fibre footprint, not an increase in the fibre footprint. That's what every document that went to the government from the NBN Co, consistent with their board position, advocated. Using that, as you keep quoting, the flexibility clause, their flexibility was to reduce the fibre footprint, not just from the strategic plan, not just from last year's corporate plan, but to reduce it further in this corporate plan. Yet the government wrote to them and asked them to spend taxpayers' money to cost a plan that they were not doing, and the government was not suggesting that they do.
Well,
that's a factual basis, isn't it?
Well, perhaps I'm not sure I can add any more, Senator. Other than the government, I think the two shareholder ministers were keen to ensure that, given information had been substantially updated as part of the corporate planning process, that there should be a comparison to the new costing on the multi-technology mix and alternatives. And so they asked the company to prepare that.
But the company weren't considering going down that path. They were going in the opposite direction in both their board position and their corporate plans drafts submitted and their final draft submitted.
Well,
that's what the board did. That's what the company recommended. That's what the board adopted. And that's what the corporate plan said. But the government directed them to cost an alternative plan that was neither government policy nor NBN policy.
But Senator, I think, as Mr Robinson has pointed out before, that NBN Co is given that flexibility so that they may actually change approaches within the corporate planning process for next year or the year after.
Yeah, well, they could also decide they want to fly to the moon, but that's not what their policies were, and that's not what the government's policies were. So, could you, Minister, why did you get NBN Co to cost what you believe a rival political party's policy was? Why are you spending taxpayers' money to actually have what may or may not have been the Labor Party's policy costed?
Well, I don't think that this is being presented as the Labor Party's approach. And let me just quote from the letter from the shareholder ministers there. Shareholder ministers believe an updated cost estimate for a network where FTTP serves the entire fixed line footprint is a critical data point that needs to be critically costed. The FTTP NBN is an important counterfactual to the multi-technology mix rollout recommended by NBN co-management. So it's clear that it's to have a counterfactual, that the organisation can periodically consider the best mix of technologies. Obviously, the organisation has taken a view as to what the best mix of technologies is at the moment, and government suggested that a counterfactual would be something useful for them to do.
So the government suggested that they should go and provide a costing for what could be an alternate Labor Party policy?
That's not, well, that's your characterisation.
That's exactly what it is.
That's your characterisation.
So testimony from NBN Co Bill Morrow indicates that the counterfactual in the corporate plan is based on what it would cost to go back to the all-fibre build today, not what it would have cost if it had continued. So I'll read the scenario, I'll read his testimony out for you. Mr Morrow, there was no request that said if you went back in time hypothetically from 2013 and if you kept going with an all FTTP fixed line footprint, what would the number be? We were not asked to do that. The question by the government was, if we were to look at moving right now back to FTTP environment, what would the number be? And that was a Senate Select hearing. Are you aware of that?
I am now, Senator.
So what policy basis?
You've shared.
So what policy basis was there for NBN Co to move back to an all-fibre rollout right now, which is Mr Morrow's words? What was the policy rationale? Mr Robinson, Minister?
Well, as I said, there's a counterfactual so that NBN can check periodically that what they're doing is still the fastest, best, most cost-effective way of delivering the NBN.
So, Mr Robinson, you don't think this gives rise to the fact that the government are using taxpayers' money to cost alternative policy positions of alternative partners? Sorry.
Opinion.
No, I'm asking him whether or not this breaches the guidelines.
I think it's in line with the guidelines, Senator.
So, just so we're clear then, section 1.7 of the guidelines provides that GBEs are meant to, and I'm quoting, maintain the highest standards of integrity, accountability and responsibility. Could you explain how manufacturing a scenario for political purposes is equal to the highest standards of integrity, accountability and responsibility?
Well,
I'm asking Mr Robinson, but you're welcome to interject.
Well, no, obviously, there are some assumptions in your question which you're seeking Mr Robinson to pass judgment on.
No, I'm asking him to tell me how it stacks up against the guidelines he's meant to oversee.
Well, I think Mr Robinson's already answered that question.
Well, I'm asking him specifically against maintaining the highest standards of integrity, accountability and responsibility match up. I want him to confirm that he believes that against those three things, the government requesting NBN Co to provide an alternate political party policy costing meets those guidelines.
Well, there's an assumption there in your question which is not accepted, and you can't present a scenario with assumptions in there which are not accepted and then expect Mr Robinson to address it. Mr Robinson has answered that he sees no issue with what has been done compared to the guidelines.
So the letter from shareholders further states that this scenario 1.5 is not expected to replicate the rigour of NBN Co's business plan for the multi-technology mix rollout. In fact, NBN Co describes this counterfactual in its corporate plan as, and I quote, a high-level desktop analysis. But the shareholder letter also states that NBN Co should be, and I quote, prepared to stand behind its credibility. So you tell them to go and do a costing of a Labor policy and we want you to defend it publicly.
Well, no, the NBN was asked to do a counterfactual and that NBN should do that counterfactual on a basis that they're comfortable with. That if NBN do the counterfactual on a basis that they're comfortable with, then NBN obviously would have no issue in supporting that work.
Minister, you might want to pretend that you didn't have NBN Co cost what you believe Labor's policy was going to be, but I'm asking Mr Robinson how he equates that behaviour against integrity, accountability and responsibility in the GBE guidelines. And then, even worse, NBN Co are told to do it and to defend it publicly and to defend what is clearly a political counterfactual that is only a high-level desktop analysis. You maintain, Mr Robinson, that letter directing them to do this, or if you want to maintain it's a request, and has there been a change to the GBE guidelines?
Well, I think the GBE guidelines, as are published, they have been changed, I think, fairly recently.
No, they have been changed. No, I actually understand that they have been changed. So, for instance, letters like this aren't automatically published on a website anymore. I understand that's one change. So I'm just asking, off the top of your head, and I'm happy for you to take this on notice, if you don't know off the top of your head, what the other changes are. Does it say you're now allowed to get opposition policies costed under the guise of a counterfactual?
That's it.
That's a factual question. You can say yes or no.
It's a statement that you're making, which we don't accept. But obviously, Mr. Robinson can answer in relation to whether guidelines have been changed, but don't accept the characterisation that you're putting on what NBN Co was suggested to be done.
Okay, well, thank you, Senator Conroy.
Sorry,
Senator
I'm not
Conroy.
remotely finished.
So Senator Conroy, just as I said initially, 20 minutes. I'll go for 10 minutes to Senator Back, and then if you have more questions, I'll come back to you.
I'm not agreeing with the whatever
Senator
agreement
Conroy,
you claim.
Senator
you
Conroy,
have.
Senator Conroy, I'm the chair of this committee. I've got an agreement with the deputy chair and with the
Well,
other
I'm not
members of this
accepting the
committee.
agreement with the deputy
Senator
chair,
Conroy,
and I
your
can't
time is
conceive
over
why
for
the
the
deputy
moment.
chair would have agreed to such a thing.
Senator Conroy, please, I'm speaking. What my ruling is in accordance with section 6, with what is it?
There is no
Standing
rule.
Order 26.4.
There is no
I
rule.
will
Don't
come
make
back
a
to
rule
you
like I'm
and
trying
you'll
to
be able to
defend.
ask questions for as long as you want. But now Senator Back has the call.